Hey, I'm Bob and I like to make stuff. Today I'm going to use hardwood for all these parts.
Bandsaw. You could also use a jigsaw for this. It would just be a little... When I cut out the outline of the blade, I tried really hard to stay right on the outside of the tape, but I didn't get it perfectly smooth. Blade and to the sword, I used a sander. But this time I used my belt grinder instead because the sandpaper is a smaller area and I had a little bit more control. I went back and forth from side to side, sanding it down to try to get an even bevel right in the middle of the blade. Also, because it's a thin piece of sandpaper, I could make micro adjustments to the back to any areas that were flat or needed to be evened out. And finally, I used an orbital sander to remove the original finish from the top side of the wood. This makes the entire thing raw wood and ready for even finish later. The tang was still as thick as the thickest part of the blade, and I needed that to be thinner so that it would fit on the inside of the handle. So I used the table saw and the bandsaw to trim it down, trying to make it even from side to side. Getting an even cut on both sides of this was actually a little bit harder than I expected, and I had to do quite a bit of trimming and then come back with the chisel to even it up. The outside cuts of my tang were not perfectly straight and parallel, and since this was going to go inside the handle later, I decided to use the sander to flatten them out. And after those were down to size, I used a chisel to square up the corners in between the blade and the tang. This will make sure that it's a nice snug fit when it goes into the tsuba or the handguard. To make that piece, I used some calipers to figure out the outside dimensions of my tang and then mark those onto another piece of hardwood. I just connected those dots with a pencil so I had a reference point, making sure to only cut away material on the inside of that box. I used the drill press to hog out most of it, and then went to the tedious work of actually clearing it out and making it the right size. Most of this was done with the Dremel, being really careful to just go up and down and not drag it along the face, but then eventually I had to move past that to use a file. The first thing I really did with the file was trying to square off the corners to make sure that it would fit at all. Once I got it squared off, I could get the end of the tang in place, then it was a matter of clearing out more material. I went ahead and ran it through the table saw to thin down the overall material so there was actually a lot less to sand. This was trial and error, and every few minutes I got the tang to go in a little bit further and a little bit further, and eventually there was a really nice fit. I traced the outline of the blade, and this was actually really important because I needed to be able to find the center line of where the blade set in relation to that piece of wood. I drew a center line along those two marks and then printed out a template of an oval that was the outside shape.
Hey, I'm
to line up a plate tang.
video
Into the lot and doing needed was perfect as a few flames. As the amount of I use it would as the handle and this with and brought out the color in the wood. 24.
Happy with how it turned out, and I love the way it looks. It's super cool that this was like this if you want. According to that, let me know what you're
hai bên bạn khi ngày dài thử sức. NutriBoost luôn sẵn sàng cho năng lượng.
Yok. Uzun neler var, neler yok. 38 santim var. Tabii diyeyim sizin. Biraz önce ben yağ ile diyor arkadaşlar. Yani gel.
Hey, I'm Bob and I like to make stuff. Today I'm going to use hardwood flooring to make a katana.
Alo. Alo.
Nghe.
Rồi, ok, ổn rồi. Đồng lắm ông ơi. Fortune key.
One off the UK. One piece off.
Sáu tường.